Regulation H has been announced, and I'm sure you guys are wondering what Pokemon you should actually be using. From having played some of this format, while I would say that a lot of the Pokemon among the top picks are pretty similar, there's enough new picks that I think really do justify a video like this, since banning all the legendaries and Paradox Pokemon does change things up quite a bit. Because of this, let's break down the 10 best Pokemon right now in Regulation H. While this format is still rather new, I'm going to try and keep it at least a Pokemon that I think both long-term will be viable, but also some stuff that's just really dominating right now. So if you guys have a different list than mine, make sure to comment it down below, as I'd love to see your guys' opinions. On your way down there, make sure you're still subscribed, because if you watch the content like this and you've enjoyed other videos, there's a good chance that you probably aren't actually subscribed though, because less than 10% of you guys watching actually have hit that button. And in case you've already hit that button and want to go even further, there's also the join button, where for just a couple dollars a month, your support goes a great way towards helping support the editors to keep the content going. With that said though, let's start with the worst Pokemon on today's list, our number 10 spot. Starting off today's list is a Pokemon that's actually really noteworthy in Regulation G, and it's a really good support pick. However, I do think it's fallen off a little bit in the current format. With Whimsicott, we finally have a format where it doesn't actually need to compete with Tornadus, and it's proven to still be really good. While there's definitely other Pranks or Tailwind Pokemon like Murkrow that even have some good niches over Whimsicott due to the move Haze, which helps a lot with the High Rise and Dondozo, or even Talonflame, which is a lot more of an offensive Tailwind setter that still has priority Tailwind with Gale Wings and can completely decimate opponents with a strong priority Brave Bird. Despite this though, Whimsicott is still a really good pick, as its support move pool is pretty unrivaled thanks to options like Encore, Tailwind, Helping Hand, Sunny Day, Fake Tears, and Charm, to name a very select few options this gets. Because of this, Whimsicott can easily tailor itself to fit onto any hyper-offensive team rather perfectly. Due to the rise in Steel types being very prominent right now, a lot of Fairy types have fallen out of play, but even outside of matchups where you would rely on Whimsicott for its Fairy typing, you can still get some good value out of it thanks to this type of move pool. Your Moonblast won't exactly hit the hardest into a format like this, but considering there's a lot of different Terra Dragon options right now, Whimsicott, even with the rather weak offensive Moonblast, could still at least do some decent work here. At minimum, this at least means that your team won't be completely screwed over by something like a Terra Dragon Incineroar or a Terra Dragon Gholdengo, but at the same time though, Whimsicott does have a lot of competition for a Tailwind spot against Pokemon like Murkrow and Talonflame, though I still do think it is definitely the strongest Tailwind setter we have right now. We've just discussed what the best Tailwind setter is, but what about the best Trick Room setter? Well, at number 9 today, we have Farigiraf, which is easily the best Trick Room setter in the format right now. When Regulation A was first played, a lot of people really didn't actually go for Farigiraf due to the fact that Indeedee was typically a slightly better choice, as it was the only terrain setter, and this provided some very good niche next to Pokemon like Armored. While these psychic terrain teams are still really strong, with the reintroduction of Rillaboom, as well as a higher focus on priority Pokemon like Palafin and Incineroar this time around, Farigiraf definitely is a very appealing pick as a good anti-priority option. Armored Tail is a really potent ability that only stops your opponent from using priority moves, and while it does require Farigiraf to be on the field, this isn't really a huge issue in a low power format. While it definitely is a good support pick with options like Trick Room, Helping Hand, and even Imprison to stop other Trick Room teams, you still get a lot of value out of the combination of Throat Spray and Hyper Voice, which makes Farigiraf into an actually really devastating wall breaker. Farigiraf has a lot of strong synergy with good Trick Room Pokemon like the Ursalunas, Kingambit, and even Archaludon, to name a very small few set of Pokemon, but it can really fit onto just about any team, even if you're not planning to use Trick Room at all. It's easily one of the lowest drawback Pokemon on this list, as there's not really a reason to ever just ignore using Farigiraf, but at the same time, I think it's a lot less potent than everything else that's currently ranking above it. At number 8, we have Archaludon, which is an absolute monster in the format. While I think right now Archaludon is seen as one of the best picks due to the fact that Rain is so terrifying, at the same time though, it still has a lot to work with. While I think Rain is currently the best weather in the format, and this does mean that Archaludon is one of the best abusers of Rain, there's still a lot going against it, such as the fact that weather typically never really holds on to the dominant spot for long, especially in recent generations. Despite this though, Archaludon has a lot of really good synergy with Rain, such as the fact that it is a really good water type resistance that can also completely devastate opposing water types thanks to its signature move Electroshot, which when Rain is up, it only takes a single turn to attack, and it boosts Archaludon's special attack by 1 stage. This means that you're a really perfect partner for Pelipper, which would otherwise not really like taking on opposing water types, and it allows your other water type Pokemon in the back, such as Palafin and Basculegion, to become very terrifying win conditions. There's a lot of appealing reasons to still use Archaludon outside of Rain though, such as its terrifying Steel and Dragon typing, that with Terra Fairy becomes a really perfect synergy, or even the move Body Press, which allows Archaludon to not only hit opposing Steel types that would wall your stab, but it also even gets a lot of benefit from the ability Stamina, which every time you're attacked gives you a +1 boost to your physical defense. This means that with the item Assault Vest, you really do become one of the best defensive pieces in the game, and outside of Pokemon like Dondozo that has Unaware, or even just a Ghost type, you really aren't going to actually wall this Body Press from Archaludon, making it arguably your strongest offensive option. There's a lot of different reasons to use Archaludon on a team, but I do think its usage will drop, especially as Pelipper probably will go down later on, but I do think it still has enough noteworthiness in the format. Just, there's better steel types in the tier that I'll talk about later. I would argue Pelipper is actually slightly better than Archaludon, and while I think that Cheese as a whole, relying on Rain, is a little bit worse right now, it's the one type of Cheese strat that I think does deserve a mention here. I think Pelipper's placement goes beyond just what it can actually offer to Rain, as Pelipper does have a lot going against other Pokemon in the tier. For starters, this is probably one of the best Pokemon you could fit into just one team slot that can actually combat the likes of Incineroar and Rillaboom at the same time. Not only this, but Pelipper also just goes beyond benefiting only Rain Sweepers, since while you do benefit any offensive water type, you also can benefit Archaludon's Electro Shot, or even just any Pokemon that doesn't want to take as much from Fire type moves. Likewise, you can also keep Pelipper in the backline and essentially use it to stop any opposing weather. While Rain still is the most common weather, this is still a nice niche that Pelipper does provide, and it does give you a nice dominance in most matchups. Pelipper also has a lot of strong options outside of its weather though, such as the move Tailwind, which gives you a 2x boost to your speed on a rather bulky Pokemon, or even the move Wide Guard, which is great at stopping options like Choice Specs Gholdengo, or even Bloodmoon Ursaluna using its signature move, which is also fittingly named Bloodmoon. Pelipper is also one of the few flying types in the tier right now, which is actually a really important thing, as we don't have many good options since Tornadus was banned. Because Pelipper can make its own Rain benefit the move Hurricane to become a very consistent stab option, this means that you are able to combat a lot of the different grass types right now, which is something that many other flying types can't do without having any drawbacks. I really can't understate just how valuable Pelipper is even outside of its Rain niche, but there still are some stronger options in the format. At number 6, we have Palafin, which is easily one of the best balanced Pokemon in general right now. Palafin benefits greatly from this very switch-heavy metagame that focuses on partners like Incineroar and Rillaboom on most given teams, and it has taken the role as essentially the Urshifu rapid replacement for this type of duo. Because both these Pokemon benefit vastly from switching, with Incineroar providing you a good Intimidate boost as well as Fake Out Pressure, and Rillaboom resetting terrain, you can get a lot of benefit out of Palafin because it does require you to switch it in and out one time. Because of your ability 0 to Hero, once Palafin switches in and out once, you can get access to the Hero form of Palafin, which has a 160 attack stat, which is the highest of any offensive stat in the tier right now, tied with Slacking, which is a lot more gimmicky. Palafin's already a menace with that pure water typing, as well as a really strong attack stat. But what if I told you this Pokemon had one of the best priority moves in the game in the form of Jet Punch, which is a 60 base power water type priority move, making it just a better upgraded version of Aqua Jet. This allows you to really tear through teams with a Mystic Water or Choice Band, and it makes Palafin one of the best wall breakers right now for the physical side. While options like Farigiraf and Indeedee do block opposing priority, you can combat them pretty easily with Wave Crash, and especially if you partner this with Rain or a Helping Hand boost, it's very difficult to even take just one attack from Palafin. I think it's easily the best physical wall breaker in the tier right now, but I do think at the same time there are 5 more noteworthy Pokemon in the tier. I think Amoonguss is the epitome of the barrier to entry from the 6th best Pokemon to the 5th best Pokemon, as it is the reigning best support Pokemon of all time in my opinion. Amoonguss is one of those very few Pokemon that really does just dedicate several team building slots to be made on any given serious team. You'll typically need at least one grass type, a safety goggles user, and at least one Terra Grass Pokemon, if not multiple. And even then, this only does a minimal job at stopping Amoonguss from doing things like using Spore to put your team to sleep, or drawing in your opponents with Rage Powder. Any Pokemon that doesn't take Amoonguss seriously by either becoming a grass type or using safety goggles will end up getting drawn into any sort of Rage Powder, making it so your win cons next to Amoonguss will become that much more terrifying. Not only this, but Amoonguss being able to put Pokemon to sleep with the 100% accurate sleep move in Spore is something that really can't be understated, because the only other Pokemon capable of this have significantly worse stats. Just like with Palafin, Amoonguss also benefits a lot from this very switch heavy metagame, as partners like Palafin and Incineroar switching in do allow you to take advantage of the ability Regenerator, which will heal Amoonguss back by 1/3, making it a very difficult wall to KO. Despite this though, Amoonguss also benefits these two in particular greater than most other Pokemon in the tier, since even if your opponent has 2 different Pokemon immune to Spore and Rage Powder, there's still a secret move in your arsenal that can very easily help these 2 Pokemon in particular with winning a match. Because of the move Pollen Puff, which is usually your only offensive move, you can at least either target opposing grass types that would wall Palafin, but you can also use this as a way to heal up Incineroar and Palafin, or really any partner for Amoonguss, by 50% of their health. This can make bulky Pokemon such as these really unkillable in the tier, and because Amoonguss is also a very difficult Pokemon to take down, you can essentially create an endgame where your opponent just can't actually break you properly. While I do think Amoonguss is by far the best support-only Pokemon in the tier, there are 4 Pokemon that I do still think definitely outclass it. I've already discussed the best physical wall breaker, but our special wall breaker does require a bit more of a contentious discussion here. I think of everything in the list today, these are the 2 Pokemon that I definitely agonized over the most when deciding a 3rd or 4th place. I could definitely see a lot of you guys having disagreements over this down below, but I am going to give the 4th place spot to Bloodmoon Ursaluna, which I think is at least the best immediately threatening offensive Pokemon right now. Bloodmoon Ursaluna is the only Pokemon on the tier right now that doesn't either require a choice item, a setup turn, or a switching out turn like Palafin to just be viable. This is an incredible wall breaking spot, and it is very difficult to check defensively. With the ability Mind's Eye, you could turn your normal type stab into a very threatening option that very few opponents can actually switch in on. While you would typically check this with a Steel or Rock type since you can't use a Ghost type Pokemon, because Bloodmoon Ursaluna's other stab is ground, you really can't do anything to just defensively wall this. Terranormal Hyper Voice is a very potent option with a Life Orb or Throat Spray item, and it can pretty easily KO most opponents in a single turn. Because of this, you would typically have to seek out a fighting type to check Ursaluna, and there really aren't a lot of good ones. Since we banned Urshifu, there are very few fighting types that actually can hold a candle to this, and very few that can actually also just KO Ursaluna in one hit. While I would say that Bloodmoon Ursaluna is definitely a very difficult Pokemon to KO, we have seen the rise in options like Gallade, Annihilate, and even Flamigo, to name a few, that have been seen as a really good way to actually break past this. Though I think as time goes on, we'll see a lot more fighting types pop up in the current format that can actually hold a candle to killing Bloodmoon in one attack. Now we do have one other strong special attacker, and I would argue this is the best special wall breaker in the tier, and it's easily our 3rd place Pokemon right now, Gholdengo. While I think Bloodmoon is a lot more menacing on the very first turn, Gholdengo still has a lot of ways that it can outmaneuver most opponents. With either a choice specs or a nasty plot, you can make this into a very quick wall breaker that can get past pretty much anything, with its options like Shadow Ball and Make It Rain that are very difficult for most players to combat. Gholdengo has 2 key factors for me that give it a really good edge over Bloodmoon's, despite how difficult it is to actually revenge this Pokemon. For starters, Gholdengo's ability Make It Rain makes it a very difficult Pokemon to combat with any sort of support moves, as it's immune to pretty much all of them. This means that you strictly need to either rely on an offensive pick or use Wheezing as a way to stop your ability, and good luck with using Wheezing viably right now. On top of this, Gholdengo's Steel and Ghost typing is a very desirable typing both defensively thanks to the benefits that Steel provides, as well as offensively, since without Fluttermane in the format, we really did need a good special attack and Ghost type. Before we break down the clear top 2 Pokemon right now, I do want to end up giving a few honorable mentions that ended up missing the video that I'm sure a lot of you guys have already commented about. I tried to avoid most very cheese heavy strategies such as Mouse Hold Annihilate, Dondozo Tatsugiri, and Indeedee Armarouge to name a few, as while these are still very close to the top 10 and most probably even make the top 20, I think they'll all fade out of relevance a lot as the format ages on, but they're very good on ladder right now, and they're very good while people are still figuring out teams. Among this list, I could really only see Annihilate actually rising to the top 10, as its fighting typing is very desirable without Urshifu, and this was my literal 11th pick right now. So if I made an updated version of this at the end of the format, I could see Annihilate actually being on there. I also want to give a quick shout out to Porygon 2 and Basculin Legion, which ended up nearly making the list, but I felt like Farigiraf and Palafin outclassed them respectively. Porygon 2 is a still very difficult Pokemon to KO due to its pure normal typing, just like with Bloodmoon, and Basculin Legion is a little bit better than Palafin strictly on rain teams, but I do think that at least the rain will die out a little bit, and Palafin will see a lot more usage over Basculin Legion as time goes on. Now that we've cleared through the honorable mentions, I do want to take the time to just give the pros and cons to our top 2 spots, as I think a lot of you guys already knew that Rillaboom and Incineroar would be making this list of the top 2. Let me go over really quickly what actually does make these Pokemon so terrifying, and then I'll go over what I think is the best one of the 2. Starting off with Incineroar, I think this is a much more terrifying Pokemon on paper as just a nice catch-all pick. With its ability Intimidate and its supportive move pool with options like Knock Off, Fake Out, Parting Shot, Will-O-Wisp, Helping Hand, and Taunt, you really can't go wrong with any sort of Incineroar moveset. Flare Blitz is also a very powerful stab as we don't have a lot of good fire types right now, and this helps a lot with some common metagame threats like Rillaboom, Gholdengo, and Amoonguss to name a few. With defensive Terra options like Grass being very powerful with the Citrus Berry movesets, or Terra Water and Dragon being great defensive options with safety goggles, Incineroar is a really good pick into a lot of common threats in the format, and it's probably one of the best ways to shut down a Pokemon like Amoonguss in a single spot without having to worry about anti-priority. Meanwhile, Rillaboom has a lot more of an offensive role to its moveset, but it still is a great support pick. Fake Out and U-Turn are very easy to cycle in and out, allowing Rillaboom to make sure it's always having a field advantage, and while I would consider Incineroar the great equalizer in the format, I think Rillaboom is arguably the best anti-cheese Pokemon right now, as it is the best mutual check to both Rain and Psy Spam by a long shot. Rillaboom is also one of the strongest priority users in the tier, thanks to its own terrain boosting its damage for Grassy Glide, making it a very consistently spammable option, especially when a lot of the Pokemon's power level has went down. With Terra Grass and a Miracle Seed, this borderline becomes a good wall breaker even, and while I think there's a lot more versatility that could be explored with Rillaboom, such as Swords Dance sets, I think for the time being, it's much more used as a very good fake out pivot that can still benefit from cleaning up teams. While I do think that Rillaboom has a good chance at becoming the #1 Pokemon as the format goes on though, I do have to give it to Incineroar. Though if rain doesn't fall off like I think it will in a couple of weeks, I think that Rillaboom could potentially be seen as the objective #1 pick. Let me know down below what you guys think of my final list, and if you want to see more content like this, make sure you stay subscribed, as I'm sure that while a lot of you guys watching the video did enjoy, most of you guys aren't actually subscribed. We'll have plenty of Regulation H content, and while I know we've been doing a couple of videos a week for the past couple of weeks, it will be dying back again to 1 video a week, though I hope you guys still enjoy it nonetheless. Speaking of, shout out to Dose who edits all our long form content like the video you guys saw today, or even Becca who does all the short form videos. Both their links will be down below as they both make wonderful content of their own, and with that out of the way, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, guys.